All right, hello everybody. I'm Franz, former head and neck anesthesia fellow here at Mount Sinai, current attending. We're going to be talking about our Monsoon jet ventilator, which is our mechanical jet ventilator that stands in contrast to the ManuJet, which is our manual jet ventilator, which we also use occasionally for these cases, but we won't be talking about today. First up, when you find the jet ventilator, it is most often stationed just outside Annenberg 23, although it occasionally can be hiding elsewhere on the Annenberg cluster. So you might have to go search it out. When you find it, you're going to find it like this. Nothing attached in the front, two tubings for medical grade air and oxygen out the back, and a power cord. Should roll nicely into your room, and that's where we can start to talk about the setup. Going from the back to the front, we first start by connecting the power cord, obviously, to a power outlet, and then we attach the medical grade air and oxygen to their respective ports. These things are, each connector for these is unique, so they cannot be confused. The air will not screw into the oxygen and vice versa. So we connect these up. Sometimes as you're screwing in, you get a little bit of an air leak. Just keep powering through and screw until it's snug. Same thing on the other side here. Turning the machine around now. We see the display screen and control panel, as well as 4 ports that we're going to talk about. Start with our jet port. This jets oxygen and does the basic functionality of the machine. Also measures plateau pressures. This red port is for proximal inspiratory pressures. Yellow port is for supplemental oxygen. The H2O port is for humidified oxygen, which we don't really use here too often, but is useful for longer cases where there's a potential morbidity from drying out the airway. When you get the Monsoon set up like this, you'll open the drawer. It's often going to look like this, everything just crammed in here. You'll notice that there's the different colored tubes. These all have unique connectors, so they can't be misattached to the wrong port. The absolute minimum one you need to start the operation of the machine is the jet port. It should plug in here. You should hear a nice click. If you want to use any of the other ones, you can plug those in as well. It is very important to note that the power, the oxygen, the air, and the jet all need to be plugged in before you turn on the machine. If you turn on the machine without connecting those, you're going to get some weird pressure alarms that can compromise the safety and functionality of the machine. All right, I think we're ready to turn it on, and to do that, we again go to the back of the machine where you see a big power button that says start or stop. And the machine should come to life and start powering up. All right, now that the machine is turned on and powered up, again, want to bring attention to this port here. This was connected prior to turning on the machine. If at any point this becomes disconnected, you can't just plug it back in. You have to turn the machine off and start it all over again. Otherwise, you will once again get those weird pressure alarms that compromise the integrity of the machine. Going through the hard buttons here, we have start and stop. Pretty self-explanatory. Pressing the start button will start the jet ventilator at the settings you have programmed into the screen. You can switch here between auto, which is the functionality we just showed you there, and manual, which will jet manually every time you press the starter button for the duration of the time you press the start or stop button. Laser functionality on and off. As you'll know, we're set to 100. Notice we'll set to 100% oxygen right here. Pressing the laser button will drop it to 30% oxygen, which is a oxygen concentration that is safe to jet ventilate with in the presence of a laser. Initially, it's going to tell you not to use the laser because, as you can imagine, immediately turning this to 30% oxygen doesn't clear out the 100% oxygen that's in the lungs and the conducting airways. So it waits a few minutes or a few seconds of jetting to kind of clear out that oxygen and drop the airway O2 concentration to something that's more appropriate for laser ventilation. Pressing the button again will drive you back up to 100% oxygen. Cancel alarm, reset alarm, pretty self-explanatory. Okay, I think that's a good thing for there. And then we can go through these buttons next. Turning now to the soft buttons on the screen, we have a driving pressure. That's the pressure coming out of here that you're jet ventilating out. We have a frequency. We have an inspiratory time, so what percent of the fraction of time here is spent in inspiratory versus expiration. We have 2 alarms, a plateau pressure alarm and an inspiratory pressure alarm. Plateau pressure alarm is functional with just the blue tubing attached. If you want to use the inspiratory pressure, you need to connect the red tube also. Auxiliary, this is your auxiliary oxygen coming through the yellow port. if you want to use that. And then climatization is if you have fluids hooked up for humidified jet ventilation. This allows you to determine the amount there. To demonstrate one of the safety features of the machine, that is the plateau pressure cutoff, we're going to first occlude the jet ventilator with this glove here. And then we're going to ask you to keep your mind on this plateau pressure monitor. Right now it's set at 0, obviously, because nothing's running through it. It's very quickly going to build up, and then the machine will cut off when it reaches the predetermined limitation pressure here. So let's start with jet ventilation. We quickly see it builds up and cuts off very fast. The machine will continue to cut off until the pressure drops below 40% of this cutoff value here. So as we release the pressure, it's going to drop very quickly and go back to jetting, and we can cut our alarm there. All right, so we've reached a point where we have the oxygen connected to the wall, we have the air connected to the wall, the machine is plugged in. At the very least, your blue jet ventilator port is plugged in, and for this demonstration, we're also going to be using the proximal inspiratory pressure alarm. All this is plugged in, the machine is turned off. We now turn the machine on. As I said before, if you turn the machine on without those things connected, it's going to give you weird pressure alarms and compromise the safety of the machine. Also, if at any point the blue or red become unplugged and you have to plug them back in, you cannot just continue to use the machine. You have to stop, turn the thing off, and turn it back on again with everything plugged in appropriately. Once you've turned it on, it takes a minute to load up, and it should eventually bring you to a screen that looks like, all right, brings us to a screen that looks like this, has some pressure monitors up here, and a bunch of soft buttons here. As we've discussed before, these are plugged in here, and on the other end we have a lure lock. So now we'll show you what this connects into and demonstrate the functionality of the machine. There's 3 different ways to jet ventilate: supraglottically, subglottically, and I hope you never have to do this, transtracheally. Supraglottically, we generally just use the blue. It's connected to a small metal piece that will be given to you by the proceduralist. It's like an L-shaped tube, screws into the lure lock, and then it connects directly to their laryngoscope. And after that, you're able to jet above the glottic opening. The other way to do this is subglottically with the Hunsaker tube. It comes in this box, which you can find on Annenberg 7 Workroom. You'll pull it out. It's in a protective sleeve like this. The Hunsaker tube. The jet portion is down here at the green basket. The green basket allows this to sit centrally in the airway and also prevents you from puncturing anything you didn't want to puncture. You can see a small tube off to the side here. This is where you're going to measure your inspiratory pressure if you want to, as well as your end tidal CO2. Sliding up to the top, we see that comes out to a 3-way stopcock, allows you to attach 2 things to it. And then here is our stylet, which aids in placement, but while we're using the machine, we'll take out. First up, you have your blue. Your blue connects to the jetting port. Red, if you're going to use it, then connects to the stopcock here. And the final portion is you can connect your end tidal CO2 from your ventilator to this here. Now, while this is open, you are measuring end tidal CO2. It will pick up a number for pressure, but because there is a certain amount of pressure that's being offloaded by the end tidal CO2, this is not necessarily accurate. To get an accurate end tidal pressure, you have to close off the CO2 port, and now you are getting a direct pressure measurement from the tip of the instrument here. We start jetting, and we will use a nitrile glove as a substitute for the lung here. And as I kind of occlude it, you can see we start to get an inspiratory pressure reading on the monitor. So we know that we're operating with safe airway pressures here. While jetting, you will get an end tidal number back if you have not occluded it. However, that end tidal number is going to be during a very dynamic jet ventilation period and is often going to measure just end tidal from the conducting airways, which is not going to be a true sense of what your actual end tidal is deeper in the lungs. To get a more accurate end tidal measurement, we have this end tidal CO2 button. When you press this, it's going to switch from whatever you have set to 5 long breaths with 10-second pauses in between. And the idea here is that you give this long pressure to expand the lungs and expand the chest as much as you can, and as that comes down and you get this passive exhalation, you're going to get a more accurate end tidal CO2 measurement. So like I said, 5 breaths, 10-second pause. When it's done this, it'll revert to its normal settings, and then this timer here will begin to tick off, and that'll let you know how much time it's been since you last checked for an accurate end tidal CO2. If you liked what you heard here today, be sure to follow and smash that subscribe button.